show. So we are a few minutes late, but we're gonna rush on to get the show going. And we're so happy and privileged to have the Pastor Elaine here to share with us about how not to abuse your identity. Is that right? I
Yes.
Yes.
To
So
overcome that and yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So this is going to be a great topic. Thank you so much for being here. So we're going to let Sarah kick off the show.
Definitely. Let me share this real quick. Okay. Oops. Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome back. It's so good to see you again and talk to you. Again, I'm just introducing myself quickly so that we can get on with our show. I'm Sarah M. I grew up in Cambodia, and I unfortunately have to live through that horrible experience, the killing fields, the genocide in Cambodia. But you already know there's a good ending in this story because I'm here sitting in front of you, and you know that God has protected me and saved me from destruction. So I'm so grateful that I'm here, and I got to meet so many wonderful people like Pastor Elaine, like Lee. Hey! So without telling you the whole story, and this is my book, How I Survived the Killing Fields. You can find it on my website, sarahm.com. Um, and also, I'm a speaker. If you have an occasion that you need somebody to inspire your audience, reach out to me or to Lee or to Pastor Elaine. We all are speakers. So um, we you can have all of us together in one show. That's probably would be fun.
I love that. I love that. Yeah.
So, all right, back to you, Lee.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for getting us going. Hi, my name is Lea Tran, and I am a co-host, a part of this journey that we have been creating since last March, and it's almost our anniversary, our 1 year anniversary from I want to say this is the gift of COVID-19 that's starting us to have all this conversation, because we want to inspire people to focus on the thriving part, the the part that get them grow, the part that make them stronger. And because both of us has been there, Sarah and I were former refugee. We both came to this country 40 plus year ago, and it took us a long journey and many patches on our skins and our knees and our bruises that we covering up, and that's how we got here. And my story has also been told on the TEDx stage 2 years ago. And this past summer, I also, past fall, actually, I did wrote my memoir, and it's called I Did Not Miss the Boat, because truly I did not. And I don't want anyone to miss their boat in life either. And you can find my book on Amazon, and there's an e-Kindle book, and also on my website if you want an autograph copy. But enough about me, enough about us. Today we have Pastor Elaine here, trying to shed a light on us about how not to abuse our own identity, because we are very good at that, abusing us. And for the longest time, I did have identity crisis because, yes, I'm keep battling it. I'm keep bruising it. And I think wisdom is the age, and the age is the wisdom. And I'm get to a point that I have to honor it and love it and own it. So thank you for being here, Pastor Elaine, and thank you for bringing this subject to us so we can be aware of why we shouldn't do certain things to ourselves or to even the people that we love. So would you give us a little introductions and tell us about why your mission and how did it get started?
Oh, absolutely. So thank you so much for allowing me to come. And as I listen to your stories, there's that part of me when you talk about how we do this to ourselves. It goes, I didn't survive anything like that, but it's important that we all own our own story and that we all experienced our own situation, and what we took out of that was individual. And so I was raised in an era where you're to be seen and not heard, and you're only speaking when you're spoken to.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents lived that way. They did not talk to us as children. And so I was about 8 years old, and I heard my mom call me into the living room. And so I walked down the hallway, and I could see she's standing in the doorway. And as I got towards her, I could see my dad sitting on the couch behind her, behind the newspaper. And she just looks down at me and she says, your brother tells me that your dad's been touching you. Is that true? And I'm like, yeah. And she looks at my dad and says, is that true? And he doesn't look up from the newspaper. He says, I don't know what she's talking about. So we have this kind of weird conversation. And one time he says, I don't recall what she's talking about. And I got mad and I started yelling. I'm like, what do you mean you don't recall? It happens yesterday. It happens all the time. And he never looks up from the newspaper. And the conversation just ends. So what I learned in that moment is that when I have something really important to say, that's really valuable, no one's going to listen, nothing's going to happen. So my voice doesn't matter, which means I don't matter. So I learned to just be who anybody else wanted me to be. And I wore a mask most of my life and really tried to just morph into situations. And my identity was just like non-existent, right? And so that led to a lot of years of just acting out in this kind of stuff. And so I tell people it shouldn't surprise you that I became a marriage and family therapist and an ordained pastor, because really I'm a professional codependent. So I learned how to take care of anybody who had any kind of problem. And there's other people who are codependent. I just get paid more than they do. So with all of my years of personal therapy that I went through and 11 years of college, plus I performed professional therapy for 20 years. And my clients were still getting stuck. And I was frustrated because I like, with all of this, why are they still getting stuck? And here I am, I'm thinking I'm super bright and I've got all this stuff. And I was sitting on my couch one day and I wasn't necessarily praying because I was just thinking about this and just being frustrated. Why are they getting stuck? And I heard two words. Would you like to know what they are?
Can I guess?
You probably could. Identity abuse. Yes, identity abuse. And so I always tell everybody, say that out loud and type that in if you're watching.
Yeah.
Identity abuse. You need to remember those two words. If there's nothing else that I say that you remember, identity abuse is the most important thing. And I'm like, well, what is that? I'd heard of physical abuse. I'd heard of sexual abuse. I would have never put those two words together because they were kind of ethereal and woo-ish. And what God revealed to me was that my identity was abused before I was aware I had an identity. So I believed it as though it were true my entire life. And so there was a lie that I believed. And when I realized that, and it explained so many of the behavior issues that people had and the emotional issues that people had, I went back to the church that I was working at. So I was the counseling director on campus of my church, but I had all these interns that worked underneath me. But I went back to the staff and I'm like, oh, you're not going to believe what God showed me. And it's blah, 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 blah. And one of my friends texted me. She goes, thank you so much for sharing that with me. It showed me the lies that I was starting to believe about my ministry. And so then I went to my clients and I'm like, hey, did you know that you're believing a lie and you don't have to believe that anymore? And just watching them get set free by just understanding that my identity had been abused and abandoned, a variety of things. And that I could now choose to believe something different. So I created a course called Identity Abuse Busters. And the three things that it covers are, I am uniquely and eternally valuable to God. My uniqueness is designed to be unique for eternity. The second thing is you're going to be lied to every moment of every day for thousands of messages every day that you're going to get. And they're not going to be God-driven, helpful, and cheery and uplifting messages, right? They're in general, they're just not. And then the third thing is you can choose to believe truth even if it doesn't feel true. You can choose to believe truth even if it doesn't feel true. And that's where I spend the majority of my time, which is helping people uncover what is the truth about who you are versus what you feel about who you are, and helping them to decide to believe what is true. And so going back to my original story, about 13 years later, the police came knocking on my door. And for the second time in my life, I told somebody what was happening. And my dad did go to jail. So I am proof, and you can be too, when you want to know how the truth can set you free. So I love what I do. I love sharing that anywhere that I can. And so that's why I do what I do.
Wow. Whoa. This this is powerful in a ways that many folds, so many folds. First of all, being an Asian woman, me and Sarah came from a society that we understand exactly what you're talking about. You're being seen but not being heard, because we thought that was the Eastern and Western thing. It turned out to be a coach is a generational things.
Exactly.
So it's not so much just the culture, but it's that generation of kids are not important and kids are not to be believed, and you do what you are told. But it took me a long time as well as an identity, and um, in a way that every single one of us believed what we were told that who we are. And I didn't come from a molesting situation, but my father was really strict, and um, a lot of time that we got punished because he was just having let out his anger from pressure, from stress, from a lot of things, and all you need to do is just a little bit of something that stir up. He's not totally unreasonable, but that resentment hold on for a long time, and many times I had no idea who I am because I'm trying to please everyone except me. So that is the sense of the identity, is who you believe that you are. And you have such a great point about, it is the identity crisis that we don't even know that that's what the problem is to begin with. I mean, you got to own it. You got to be able to claim it, own it, fix it, talk about it, forgive it, forget it, and create your own. But we are stumble, especially I think women of many different races, many different culture. We all blame us, and hold ourselves as the person that we abuse ourselves. And I love that two word identity abuse, because we 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 don't abuse anybody, but we are very good about abusing ourselves.
Right. And I think too that the biggest issue that I've noticed is being aware that somebody else has lied to us. We have received that lie and accepted it as truth. And if nobody comes along and says, hey, did you know that that's a lie?
Yeah.
That we're not even aware.
Right.
We have just received it and we just walk in it every day. And I think I might have mentioned this, that I was put up for adoption at birth. And so I was adopted by these people. And so
Oh,
not
so
only
it's not your biological parents.
No. And so
Okay.
I'm actually, my mom is half Chinese. And so when I did find my biological mom and really kind of learned a lot about that particular culture, but she was a teenage mother, put me up for adoption. And so I was adopted along with two brothers that we weren't biologically related, and raised by these people who are extremely dysfunctional. And so when you were talking about, your dad and his anger stuff, my dad would come home and beat the dog every day. First thing he'd do, as soon as the car would pull up, I'd go and put my pillow over my head, because he'd get out of the car, walk in the backyard and beat the dog. So there's this constantly of dysfunction. And the messages that I received out of that is, I don't matter, I'm unsafe. And I really thought, I just need to survive this. I just need to, and that's why I really dove into education, because I thought, if I get smarter,
Yeah.
then I'll be able to get out of this.
Right.
And so really understanding how all of that impacted me, and I'm totally unaware of it. And so then we'll repeat those things because we're not really aware we're doing it.
And the complexity of your identity. And and the part that there's a lot of things that it could be a multi-culture, family, the things that it could not explain. So how do you make peace with your own identity? I mean, before that light bulb come on, I mean, there must be a peacemaking process, a healing process before you can actually understand it and teach other people how to get over it. How did that light bulb come on?
So again, when he told me about identity abuse, I stopped and thought, wow, okay, I have to just really be aware of what are the messages that I receive. And so one of the process that I take people through is to ask them, if your life was freed from self-doubt, what would be the first thing that you would notice when you woke up tomorrow morning? If all of your self-doubt was gone,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the first thing that you notice? And then let them just talk about that. I would wake up and I would stand up for myself. I would speak more confidently. I would engage in different things. I would reach for my goals better. and let them picture that in their mind. And then say, okay, what is the most negative thing that you repeatedly tell yourself? Because that's going to be the first thing that keeps you from reaching out towards that, right?
Yeah.
And then I ask them, so the first one is, what would it look like? The second is, what is the message that you tell yourself? The third is, when is the first time in your life you remember thinking that about yourself? And that usually will go back to childhood, somewhere where somebody did something or said something that really impacted you. And that's where you received that message. And then I ask them, as an adult, if you were to put yourself into that situation, what would you do? So if it was like my dad and my mom in the couch and not the whole thing, I would say, hey, he's lying. Please believe me. I can prove it to you. Let me go get my brother. Let's talk about this, right? As an adult, I would have done something different, right? And I would also believe something different. So the next one is, what would you want to believe in that moment? That my mom's not listening. I do matter. And my dad's lying. So there would be this coherence as an adult in that moment. And then the next question is, what do you want to believe now? Which is, my voice does matter. I do matter. And being able to walk through that, that memory with the truth intact as an adult, as a mature adult. And so that's kind of what I've been walking people through to help them really
Yeah,
understand.
but how did you get your like, when did you start, like in college or after you 20 years of practice, and that's how you be able to figure out that you need to clear your story and heal, begin from your own? Like, you write a book, or or talk to people, or maybe make a course? Did you make peace back with your parents, or did they, what's the outcome of that? That's my kind of question is.
Oh, is what happened with my parents?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Did you address them?
I tried to. So eventually my dad did go to jail, and my mom called me and said, why would you lie to you about your dad like that? And then sometime later, she asked me, she says, why didn't you ever tell me? And I said, I did. And I could see her going back through her mind. And she goes, why didn't you ever say anything again? And I said, you didn't believe me the first time. Why would I try again? And so really, in that moment of just really understanding that she really didn't get it, she didn't really believe, and it was probably incomprehensible to her that he would be doing that.
But
And
I guess you probably forgive them
and so,
already. Yeah.
well, yeah, and eventually I was able to go to that place where I had to forgive, and it was extremely difficult because they were extremely dysfunctional. I did cut off relationships with them because they were they did really super unhealthy, toxic things to the family, and that was sad and hard, but that's really the way that ended. But I was able to perform the funeral for my dad when he did pass away. So there was a ton of work.
I think that's the act of forgiveness. I think, with anything, for me, I think you got to forgive the people who wrong you, and then forgive yourself before you can move on. Am I right? Should that be something that you have in the process of be able to move on, and able to understand who yourself as an identity? What I'm saying is, like, forgiveness is part of the healing process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it is hard, because I think a lot of time we bear the guilt and the shame, and we don't sort of like forgive it in a sense, because I don't know, it took me a lot of time of healing, of sharing story like you are, in order to forgive, to heal, and even just doing that for ourselves. I think that is the really essential process. But
yeah, there was a remarkable moment in my life. I had cut off relationships. My mom had passed away. I had found my biological mom, and so my dad, the dad that raised me, called me one day, and left a voicemail, and I was kind of confused by that. And my pastor happened to be preaching about forgiveness, and I was teaching a Sunday school class about forgiveness, and I had to write on a rock the name of somebody that I needed to forgive. And I didn't want to put my dad on there, because it's like, I forgave him. I didn't want to have him in my life. It's like I moved on. There was other things, but really understanding that I had not genuinely forgiven my dad, but I didn't grasp that at the time. And so God then gave me a vision, and it's an extremely challenging vision. And so I don't expect everybody to receive this, but Jesus was on the cross, and as people were in the act of killing him, so
Yeah.
they're in the act of killing him, he said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. And so I had to ask myself,
Right.
would I be willing to forgive my dad while he was in the act of molesting me? Could I go to that length like Jesus did, and see that vision and do that? And what helped me do that was that next phrase, because he doesn't know what he's doing. And I really believe that my dad was an extremely sick man, and we believe he was molested in some fashion. And it doesn't excuse his behavior, but it explains his behavior. And being able to understand that when he goes before God and he is in his right mind,
Yeah.
and he sees the devastation and damage that he has created because of his behavior, and he is remorseful, I said, God, I want you to forgive him.
And
Because
it
in that
frees
moment,
yourself too. I believe that it's the forgiveness, not just free him, but it's probably free you, free the person who forgive other people.
yeah, if you're harboring bitterness and you're harboring all this ill will and harboring that kind of stuff, it definitely will do damage if you don't forgive.
Right. So that's wonderful. That's so powerful. So what's next?
And so let me tell you a story. I want to tell you the story about the day that God made Lee. Okay. Can I tell you that story? All right. So there was a day that the God that made the mountains and the oceans and the trees and the forests and everything beautiful, he stopped everything he was doing. And he said, I'm going to make a Lee. And he thought about you. And he took the cells of your body and he swirled them in his hand. And he thought about the color of your eyes and the color of your hair and the shape of your toes. And he was so excited. And he's like, angels, check it out. I'm making a Lee. And they're like, wow, God, you never made anything like that before. And he says, no, Lee's different. Lee's different than anything I've ever made before. And the way she sees the world and responds to the world is going to be different than anything I've ever made before. You thought about your favorite food and your favorite animal and your favorite color. And he says, this is good. He says, Lea, I love you. I love you so much. Everything about you matters to me. The things that bring you happiness and joy, but also the things that bring you sorrow and pain, it all matters to me. And Lea, it's my hope for you, as it is for everyone, that when I put you in the world, that you have two parents that tell you every day how much you matter to me, every day. Now, some parents, they'll do their job really well, and other parents not so much, and some parents aren't around, and then sometimes bad people do bad things to good kids. And Lee, the world's going to come along and tell you, you don't look right, you don't sound right, you don't live here, you don't know these people, you don't have this stuff. And every day, thousands of messages are going to bombard you and make you feel like you're not good enough for me. And it might get really hard for you to hear my voice and remember how much you matter to me. But Lee, I want you to know that every moment of every day, I'm right by your side. No matter where you go and no matter what you do, I will never abandon you. And I have all these angels as well that can come and minister to you. All you have to do is ask, and I'll be right there. And Lee, I also want you to know that I will never be disappointed in you. Now, I might be disappointed in some things that you say or some things that you do or even some things that you think about, but I'll never be disappointed in who you are, because you're exactly the way I created you to be. And I am your biggest cheerleader. And I am looking forward to seeing you again someday and welcoming you home and giving you a great big hug. And I hope you remember that every day for the rest of your life.
That was beautiful. And I want to ask God a question. My identity. I mean, I was not born as Lee. That was like 7 versions of my name until I got here. So that, dear God, I am a confusing puppy, and I'm still fighting to know I'm finally settled with the name Lee. And when I was born, it wasn't anywhere close to Lee. But I'm accepting me and I'm loving me. And I thank God for my life. And I thank God for the people I meet. I thank God that Sarah and I cross paths. I thank God that Sarah bring you here to help us understand a little bit about ourselves. And Sarah, do you have anything to ask Miss Pastor Elaine? You're muted.
If somebody has their identity abuse, how can be healed? What is the process?
Well, some of it is kind of like those steps that I had walked you through of really looking at where did the message come from and what is really true about that message. And then do you want to believe what is true or do you want to believe what feels true? So sometimes people come and say, wow, you're a great speaker, or wow, you're really beautiful. And we're like, yeah, I don't think so, because it doesn't feel true.
Mm,
And being able to challenge those thoughts and say, all right, where does the thought come from? And do I really still want to believe that today? And so it's really being more analytical about what we believe and where did we receive those messages.
mhm.
So this is part of your minister as helping people to heal and to not abuse their own identity. So where
Well,
can I?
I rarely talk about people abusing their own identity. I mostly talk about how they've received lies from other people and how to reject those lies.
Mhm.
Because until they're aware where the message came from,
Yeah,
otherwise it's very self-condemning. Yeah, and I don't want people to
absolutely.
do that.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah. You are so right. You're so right about that part. And lots of us don't even know that we're doing it to ourselves.
yeah.
And we do believe the lies that we tell ourselves.
And it was interesting. I kind of wanted to add this. When I was put up for adoption, I was actually labeled hard to adopt because I was a quarter Chinese and I had very Asian looking features. And so the history of my life was I wanted when I was born, right? And I was rejected by both of my parents. Then I was literally labeled, the sign on my bassinet said hard to adopt, right? And then I was adopted, but abused by those who adopted me. And so you look at the history of my life and just rejection after rejection. And I don't know why my parents would even tell me these kind of things, right? But then being able to say, okay, I feel rejected by everybody, but God is telling me that I'm not rejected by him. And I had to really work, well, how in the world can this God who's just perfect, not reject me if those who say they loved me all rejected me and the culture rejected me? And really having to say, I have to decide what I want to believe. Do I want to believe what my Christian faith is telling me to believe? Or do I want to believe what the culture and my history is telling me to believe? And it takes some serious exercise. It takes a lot of practice. The world is not going to come alongside of you and say, yes, believe in yourself. Yes, you're perfect the way you are. Don't buy anything because you're perfect. And we have to learn how to be able to put all of our faith in our religion and belief system and genuinely believe it. A lot of people don't believe it, and they actually get burnt out because they're doing all these behaviors, feeling like I'm supposed to be doing all these things, but their heart has not rested in the truth yet.
That's very enlightening. I just want everybody to know too. Whatever this is happening to you on earth, this is just temporary. It's not your heavenly father, or it's not your, I mean, you don't have to be a Christian to believe this. You can be a Buddhist, you can be a Judaism, you can be, um, any religion that you believe in. You got to believe that there's a super powerful being that who loved you, that is not temporarily on this earth. And yeah, that's another identity that I have to tap into, because I was a Buddhist, and I was an atheist, and then I was a cat, and now I found my heavenly father and my heavenly mother, that I believe that they are always looking after me. I mean, I love my earthly parents, but I know that they too rely on the heavenly father and mother to look after them. So why not go directly to the source, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your work, your beautiful, your story, vulnerable story with us. I will really appreciate that you're here. Is there any last word that you want to tell our audience?
Oh my goodness, just that the truth sets you free. And if you're not living a life of freedom, then just take some time back and ask yourself, what lies might I be believing right now? And be willing to do the work to let yourself walk in freedom. Absolutely.
Awesome. Let's be free. Sarah and I know what that word means. Be free. Be
Freedom.
free. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, have a great night, everyone, and we hope that this will cast some question into yourself, and do a little thinking, recognize where you're going, and pause take a question to see how you can get yourself out of those traps, and look up Pastor Elaine. If you need help, please reach out to her. She can help you if you have any doubt about your own identity. All right, thank you, and have a great night, everyone. Bye, Pastor Elaine.